All right, today we're meeting again. We're calling it On the Road to Treatment because last time we spoke, Jessica Buscho was literally on the road to her treatment. And today we're talking again. This is Jessica Buscho. She is a stage 4 colon cancer patient currently, and I am Lauren Huffmaster, and I am a stage 4 breast cancer patient. And we're just talking today because, again, one of our friends has passed away, and we want to discuss the issue of parenting with cancer, looking at what resources are available to our children in and through our treatments, and then of course also after we pass, what is being done, who is there for our kids, and as a society, as a community, as a cancer community, what can we do to be better at this for the next generation, so that the fear and the impact of cancer does not extend far beyond any cure that comes. It's going to extend through the generations if we can't break the emotional side effects in this cycle of what's happening in our families as we deal with the cancer in our lives. So, Jessica, thanks for coming back. Thanks for talking to me. Again, we're not happy that our conversations are inspired by the death of our friends, but we do want to honor their legacy, honor their families through conversations, so that the struggles that they are dealing with and they dealt with don't go overlooked. Don't just end as their story ends. It continues because it's a part of a bigger issue. And so, talking about parenting and cancer, this is something that's really important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me. My emotions are right at the surface. This one's really raw, so I'm going to try and hold it together, but I have no guarantees there. Um, I've I'm almost at my 4-year cancerversary, and I have three school-age kids. They are an eighth grader, sixth grader, and fourth grader now, but they were in kinder, second, and fourth when I was diagnosed. Um, and when I was diagnosed, one of my children had a really hard time and actually said that they were going to kill themselves. And like someone at school told another child at school told them, your mom's going to die, like a lot of really heavy stuff. And so we talked to the school immediately and they did like a counseling, like just check in with all the kids. And my kids have varying levels of comfort with sharing. So some of them sort of, oh, I'm fine, mom's fine, it's fine. And some of them were a little more open. But that's been the extent of it, except when we have asked the school to check in with them for specific incidences, and that was really directly through the teacher. But it's been sort of what I found is that there's nothing in place in, at least in my district. Um, and actually, I've talked to other people, and this is like pretty common, where these kids have built-in support. School is where they spend a lot of their time, and it's also, as we know from other issues, it's the teachers and school is sort of where kids go to look for consistency and support and where issues are identified. And I just think that there's a gap there. Like we're missing an opportunity to support these kids in school. And as our friend passed this week, she's a mom, and then the friend that we talked about before, she's a mom. And I think about like these kids going back to school, especially coming out of quarantine and going back to school, and it's like the last time you were in school, mom was here. And even if it wasn't in quarantine, when that time off, like around the parent's death or whatever, or even the diagnosis or whatever, you go back to school and you suddenly are different. If they go through the same process that I went through when I was diagnosed, where it's like when I see people now, it's like I know I have something different than they have, you know. So I just think that parenting with cancer is something that we should be talking about more, and then it should be something where it's a higher need for support, definitely like concrete support, whether it be social groups or resources or counseling. I don't know how they can do it, but I think that I think there's going to be a need.
And I don't think this is just even limited to the schools. I mean, I don't see an outreach from churches. I don't see an outreach from any other club or group in our communities. I think a lot of it does have to do with this idea of tunnel vision. Like for us as adults, I was diagnosed 5 years ago. My children were 2, 4, and 6 when I was diagnosed with cancer, and I now have been in treatment for 5 years. Never one time has my doctor offered me counseling or therapy or asked about my husband or my kids. There's just this idea of tunnel vision. Like we can understand how to take care of the body, or we think we can understand how to take care of the body, as we just do that as best we can. We taking care of the emotions and the impact, social impact of the cancer, that is completely different, and it's very hard to identify. It's very hard to pinpoint. It's going to be different for every single person, and so since it's so difficult, we just sort of put it to the side. Like we can't point to this, like this is what we need, and so we just ignore the problem. But the problems don't go away. And like we said, my heart is really for the next generation. I think my generation is the generation who will receive the cancer cure. What happens when the next generation is still living under the trauma of cancer, when cancer doesn't even really exist as much as it did before? Like they're still going to be carrying this on for generations. It'll impact their kids unless we can address it, find the resources and create resources around it, and really help the children as they are raised in a culture of cancer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's one exception to this, and it's Camp Kesem. And Camp Kesem, my kids have only participated virtually because they weren't ready to attend the first year after I was diagnosed. And the second year after I was diagnosed, the timing didn't work out with our school schedule. But Camp Kesem does a fantastic job. And as I understand, they do have like events throughout the year. But uh, I mention that specifically because when I look to talk about these kids, the kids of cancer patients, you know, specifically metastatic or people who have long-term lasting effects, there's not even a word for them, you know. So I keep calling them Kesem kids because I mean, even if you don't go to Kesem, that's what your opportunity is. But that's once a year, and there's annual opportunities that come up where I think families with cancer are blessed with experiences. Our family has been blessed with experiences for sure. This Christmas, we were gifted some like amazing things, thanks to some outreach through your organization, actually, and a local nonprofit group. Um, but those once a year things don't address the emotional health, and that's what you're talking about it being perpetuated for generations. I love that we are in the generation where they'll cure cancer, and I see it coming. That's why I'm such a proponent of clinical trials, because I see it coming. But you're right, like my kids will be impacted by this forever, and the way they parent their kids will be different because of what they went through with me. And I don't know where the cycle will stop unless we support them and we make them feel not so alone. One of the best things about Kesem being virtual this year is that my oldest was able to exchange contact information with a couple other kids from her group. I don't know if that's allowed, but they did. And they've stayed in contact. And I think that that's the first friend that she's made where that person also knows what she goes through. And in particular, where we live, besides talking about like the loss of a parent from cancer, we live somewhere where there isn't a cancer center in our town. So cancer treatment days are very long because they include commuting. Even if it's just commuting to the next town, it's still a longer day than, if there was a cancer center in your town. So, and for me, my commute right now is crazy because I commute to Southern California. But even before that, my commute was an hour to 3 hours into UC San Francisco. So my cancer days were, with traffic and all that, 14 hours, 15 hours because of how many drugs I was getting at the time. And that means that every 2 weeks my kids didn't see me at all for a whole day. So that experience in itself is really unique, and then them seeing me sick and having to learn to process, like, mom does this medicine that makes her really sick because it's better than the cancer, making her not, have the cancer grow. Like, it's there's a lot that they're processing on their own that I don't know how to address. And you're right, it's not just up to the schools. We need to face this and talk about that these kids are going to need support.
Yeah. And you were just saying, like, we don't know how to do it either. We're not the ones with the answers, because honestly, we're in the process of figuring out for ourselves. We are figuring out, how do I live and not live in fear? How do I find a community so I'm not isolated? Who am I in and through this, and who can I be after this is done? Or what can I leave behind? What is my purpose in this? And these are the things we have to figure out for ourselves. So it's really hard for us to figure that out, or not have the answers for ourselves, but yet also need those same answers for our kids. Like, what's going to make my kid not feel alone? What's going to make my daughter, not afraid for me and for her, and what happens, what is going to help them? Even though we are the closest to them, we don't actually have maybe the mental or emotional energy to find all of those answers. We need support. I mean, we need resources. We need people who can stand with us and do parenting with us. I'm going to go off on a tangent, but I had this idea, and it's probably wild, but there are a lot of young adults who are diagnosed with cancer who can't ever have kids. And they spend much of their life mourning for the fact that they can't have children. And then there's another group of cancer, those impacted by cancer, who won't be there with their kids, for all the events of their life. And I was like, that's like the cancer experience. Like, there's one extreme here and there's one extreme there, but we'll never find each other, and we'll never link up. But if we did, what if that person could be like a big brother, sister to our kids, and then walk through life with them? Both lives would be forever changed. Oh, and our kids would be forever changed, because the person who can't have kids would know the cancer experience, and be able to explain it to them through life. And there's just so many connections that if our community could get a way to come together, if a nonprofit could bring us together, think big picture, and bring people together, I know that the answers are out there. Everyone is tunnel visioned. Everyone's raising money for prevention, or raising money for this, or but nothing beyond that. And I just, as a survivor and through my organization, I'm trying to see bigger picture. I'm trying to see what could possibly change the entire experience, not just one aspect of it. And I know that's hard and sounds impossible, but I am very determined to find solutions for us and our kids. I mean, what else is a mom going to do? Like, I don't have any other choice. I always say, I can't not. Like, there's nothing in me that can stop, because I have to make sure my kids are cared for, and that moms that come behind me, that they have kids that are cared for as well.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you said because I feel like that was like a big aha moment. Like, so I'm in a small text group with just closest small group of women, all impacted by colorectal cancer. And we all happen to be, we are connected by stage 4 colorectal cancer. And several of us have young kids, and we are all in varying levels of trying to prepare for our kids beyond us. And that's not to say that we're not hopeful and optimistic that we outlive it. It's just, if you wait too long to plan for your kids to make memories beyond you, I feel like you miss an opportunity. And so what that looks like for me right now is I'm writing birthday cards for birthdays that I might not see, which has been an excruciating process. But I already got to throw one away, so that's good. So it's therapeutic as we'll go by the birthdays and I get to throw them away and not use them. But there's another woman in the group who is a widow, and her husband, who she loves deeply, passed from colon cancer just this last year. Um, and she's currently going through, the part of the process where she won't have him there to have kids, together. Um, and that's really hard for her. But to think of her being a guide for my kids is like, that's really beautiful.
Mhm.
So that's like such a, I'm like inspired by your ability to put two and two together there and realize like there's an opportunity there. Because I've thought about like other kids impacted by cancer that could support my kids because they've both been through it together. But there's also something really beautiful about supporting those people who are impacted by infertility. Um, but what a good thought. Hopefully someone will watch this and see that and put it
Maybe
together.
it's what you're saying. Yes. So when I was first diagnosed, I really identified with the young adult cancer group. Like that's who I was. I was in my 30s. I was just diagnosed, and so many people in the young adult sector who were impacted by cancer. That was the conversation, infertility. Because even if you did get pregnant, like what has chemo done to me? What has radiation done to me? How's that gonna impact my child? And so it was always sort of the conversation that was happening. Then it was like the first thought that hit me when I was diagnosed stage 4, because I think everybody has a season where you got diagnosed stage 4 and you just start planning for death in your children. I mean, that's all you can think about is like, all right, so now what about my kids? And so it was like the very first thought was, I'm going to find one of these young adults who is impacted by cancer and don't have the ability to have kids. And I'm going to make sure they're my kid's best friend, like starting today. It's like my goal, right? Because it heals them. Like it heals the person who can't have children. It gives my children someone to turn to, in ways my husband can't process my journey, this other person could. And the things that my kids can't possibly understand about my life today, but in 15 years they can. I want them to have someone that they love and trust, who's been kind to them, that they can say like, why did this, like, what was this about? Like, I see this in my head, but I really have no idea what it was about. And they can explain my journey through a cancer survivor's perspective to my children who watched it but didn't really have any filter for what was happening. And so I really just caught on to this. But then I decided not to die and just like focus on living. And I sort of let that go, but it's still in my heart. Like it's still such a beautiful picture of just, I don't know how to say it, but like full circle, like everyone wins, right? Everyone wins. And yeah, maybe someone will pick that up. Maybe that'll be the next program Adventure Therapy does. Who knows? But I would really like to see some people think like that, right? Not just think about infertility, do clinics on infertility and think about loss and grieving. I'd love for us to all step back and take those blinders off and really think about whole people, whole families, what is going on for all of us and how can we work together and live in community.
I think too, like for the non-cancer community, I think that or cancer muggles, sometimes some people call it a little Harry Potter reference there. I think sometimes people feel awkward, like it's an elephant in the room that you don't want to bring it up both to the survivor and to the kids of the survivor. Um, but I think that makes cancer more taboo than it has to be. The reality is like 1 in 2.5 people will have cancer. So why is it a bad word? I mean, yeah, it's excruciating, but if we make it where every time you hear the word cancer, it's like, you have this like knee-jerk reaction. I think it makes it so we don't talk about it. And this is true for like lots of difficult subjects in the world, but people think that by not talking about it, it's going to make it easier, go away. And that's just not the case. So I think, you know, to tell people around the survivor who are not going through it that it's okay to say like, how's treatment going? Like ask specific questions. Don't just say I'm here for you when you need it, or I'm going to support you, or I'll be here for your kids. Like ask specific questions. See the kids and say like, oh, how's mom's treatment going? Like, what do you do when she's tired? Or, is there a game I can come watch of yours? Or, like, do really specific things. And then if the parent has passed on, like, don't stop saying their name, talk about them. It's not like the kid is going to stop grieving because you don't say their name. Like, the grief is always there, but they feel alone in it if no one will talk to them about it. Like, we need to say these people's names and keep talking about them. I think, and we mentioned this the last time we talked, but I think the most powerful thing that you can do when someone passes is talk to their family about them and do it regularly. And, it doesn't always have to be, this big inspirational story. Just tell an anecdote, like a moment that you shared together that was special. Like, and stop making it such an elephant. Like, we have to we have to talk about it, because the grief, when you're alive and when the cancer patient passes on, like, is there. It's just, no one knows they're supported unless you talk about it.
And I think that's an action item you and I could take out of our conversations is just starting to make a list. Maybe we could just set up a space where people can just insert questions, like things that you want to be asked. Because actually, even just yesterday, an organization said, like, could you just do an educational talk about what to say to a cancer patient? Because nobody knows. We just like, there's this one moment in my mind when I had just gotten diagnosed stage 4, and a lady who's very chatty and always spent hours talking to me. She saw me in an aisle and she walked halfway down the aisle, looked at my face, turned around and walked away. And I was just like, I actually, from that moment, I went out to a friend and asked her to make me shirts that said funny things about dying. Like I'm gonna die and that's okay. Like, just like we're all gonna die. I wanted people to look at me, see my face, recognize where I was, look at my shirt and recognize it's okay. Like I'm good with it. Like I'm not to be free. I'm not afraid. And I don't want you to be afraid of me. And I wore those shirts like every day. She made me one for every day of the week. And I just wore them because I knew it, whether you do an about face and walk away from me, or you just stand there and stare at me, or you, like I say, do that, like the 2-year-old with the scratch knee, you're like, oh, I'm so sorry for you. Like, whatever your gonna response is gonna be to me, I want you to know that I'm okay with where I am, and I'm the one dealing with it, not you. So, like, let's just be normal and be friends like we were before, and then let me figure it out on my own. But I think that's that action item, like getting a connecting people's ideas, like as parents, what do we want them to ask our kids? Like going to a game, that would have never occurred to me. Like, please go to my kids' recital. Like, it's important. It's their biggest moment of their year. They wait 6 months to get to that point, and then like they have this huge lacking when mom's not there, right? Like, what if there are 30 moms there? Like, it wouldn't make up for the one, but it would definitely create a new expectation. Like, and that's when I think I said about when I was first diagnosed, my goal was not to hold tight to my kids. Actually, at that moment, my goal was to push my kids into everybody else's arms. And when I was first diagnosed, I was like, please go stay here. Please go be with this person. Let that person take you to, Six Flags. Let that person do something important with you, because I wanted them to know there were a lot of safe places beyond me, right? And but that has to be carried out. Like, that's the thing about us, as we sort of prepare in our minds on how our kids will live without us. Those relationships don't happen overnight. Our kids are going to trust them tomorrow when they start being kind to us at the funeral. We as parents have to start building relationships with our kids and other people now, so that they have that foundation, and whenever we are not there, they can grow in that relationship. But yeah, I reached out to like people. I was like, I like you and I want you to like be with my daughter because I want her to be more like you. And luckily I'm still here. It's been years, but I didn't know that at the beginning. And
How was sorry to interrupt, how was the response to that? Because I get sort of mixed response from people. And that's where I struggle, because this is why we're friends. I did the same thing, like, I feel the same way. Like, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't like I was one of 4 people missing in the baseball stands. I wanted to be one of 30 people missing in the baseball stands. Like, so but it's been met with mixed
Oh, yeah.
response. Some people think I'm too fatalistic, or not being optimistic enough, where they say, oh, keep your chin up, it's gonna be fine. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? They could have too many people at the baseball game.
There's lots of people who love them. Yeah, there's nothing wrong. Yeah, I mean, I think the people who are in family, like my husband has a ton of sisters and I have sisters, like my family really did take that to heart in some ways. And when I was sick, they always took them out and did something big on the weekends with them. Like it was a normal routine for the girls. And, looking back, we say they'll probably won't even remember me being sick. There were so many fun things happening for them. But that again, once you get your hair back, once you look good, like those relationships sort of start to go away because they assume you're taking that role over. But for people who are just sort of friends or on the outskirts of our lives and I was inviting them in, I didn't really have many people jump to it. I think it was definitely overwhelming. I was essentially asking them to be like a godparent, like, you don't know us very well, but you're awesome. And I really want you to make sure my daughter knows she's awesome like you. And that was definitely overwhelming. But even if they haven't taken action now, it doesn't mean there's not like something in their heart going like, what if I could be that person to them? Like at least it's a seed and they can start to think about it. And maybe at one point they will come alongside my daughter and be that person for them. Um, but
I think what you said about, like, there's not going to be a switch flipped at the funeral where suddenly they trust you, like that trust has to be built in advance, is really like, that's that's sort of where this has to originate from. Like, that trust has to be built up for years. And I think that I had a similar experience to you in the fact that, like, when I was diagnosed, it sort of gave me permission to parent differently and to stop feeling like I had to be everything all the time, because suddenly I was aware that I couldn't be everything all the time. Just logistically wise, like for those long treatment days, like those are days where I couldn't be there and it had to be someone else. So I think that, I did things like let my kids travel. My put one of my kids on an airplane by herself. Like, I mean, it's just like things that I don't think that I would have had the courage to do before. Cancer makes you really brave to do those things, because that's your way of empowering them.
Mhm. Definitely. We have conversations with my oldest like that all the time. Like a lot of the other moms, if they go, away for the weekend for like the middle school girls retreat, all the moms go too, or like eighth grade trips, and all the moms are going too. And I'm like, listen, my gift to you is that you're learning to do these things on your own, not because I don't love you as much as those parents, but I value your strength, your independence, your resourcefulness, and those are the things I want you to learn on these trips. And I want you to know that you can have an amazing time with your friends without me at your side. And that is a skill that you should be learning, you should be learning right now and continuing to grow. But it does come back to this. I don't know, maybe if I didn't have cancer, I'd be excited to go on all these trips with my daughter too, but it comes back to this idea that like she's got permission to have fun without me. She's got permission to have relationships that don't involve me, hobbies that don't involve me, that I don't know anything about. She has that permission in her life. So when the time comes, I'm not creating a vacuum. Like she can't move forward because she's always being sucked back because I'm not there. I've seen this play out in an adult's life. Her mom had cancer all through like high school and college, and passed away after college. And there's such a vacuum in her life that she can't quite break free of. And I just don't want that for my kids. I want them to know they have my permission to go and do the things that they can dream of without me.
Yeah, and to feel joy and to not feel bad about feeling joy in your
Yeah.
absence. Yeah.
Exactly. Mhm. Yeah. Well, Jessica, thank you so much. I think this was very meaningful. I think that as this gets saved and posted, that people were going to be encouraged, and hopefully will spark lots of new ideas for our children and their generation as they deal with the shadow of cancer over their lives. So thank you so much for being here today, Jessica. I can't wait to talk to you next time. Hopefully not because someone's died, just because we want to hang out. So that's our goal. All right. Oh, hold on. I just want to stop recording.